Hello, welcome to episode 25 already of Rail Voices of Happy Valley. In this episode, we chat in our living room with Nina Smith, who is involved in lots of things. Member of the Hebden Bridge Literary and Scientific Society, the Lit and Sci as it's called. Been a member of Calder Voices Choir, plays walking, cricket and table tennis in Todmorden Sports Centre, and many other things. But today, Nina is chatting with us about efforts to save and improve our railways, the services and the network, and is very, very knowledgeable about the whole thing. So, here we go.
Okay, so hello, good morning. Me and Viv sitting in our front room with our friend Nina Smith. Nina, you are involved in railway campaigns. Do you want to tell us a little about your involvement in sort of trying to improve our railway network?
Okay, well, I'm involved in two different campaigns. The main one is Rail Future, which is a national, entirely voluntary organisation with about 2,000 members. And our aims are in simple terms, for a bigger and better railway. In other words, we want the current railway run better, but we want a bigger railway. We want more stations, we want more routes, tracks reopened, and that's for both passengers and freight. So my role, and it has been for the last 10 years, is I chair the Yorkshire branch of Rail Future. And what we do is campaign, which means we develop relationships with the train operating companies and to sort of tell them when we think they're doing well, we tell them when they think they're doing badly, we make suggestions to them as to what they could do better. We also have good relationships with the transport authorities, which obviously locally is West Yorkshire Combined Authority, WICO or Metro, as some people call it, who are responsible for some of the infrastructure around public transport in West Yorkshire. So I've been doing that for 10 years. I was sort of secretary for about 5 years before that. How did I get into this? Around about 1970, I was sort of going through, as young people do, going through a period of trying to work out, what did I believe in? And I lived at that stage in a small town in Surrey at the foot of the Forth Downs, which is very beautiful. A lot of nice walking areas, a lot of wildlife. The M25 was being talked about, and I remember getting very involved in campaigning against the M25 coming along and ruining the North Downs.
That's interesting. You may or may not know this, but we were sort of involved in trying to stop the M60, which is the Manchester equivalent.
Right, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And I've jumped on slightly then because I'd already realised by that stage, how damaging the way that the West was developing was for the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were two very influential reports, which you may remember. The ecologists produced something called the Blueprint for Survival, and the Club of Rome produced a report called The Limits to Growth. And basically, we're talking 50 years ago, we're basically saying, look, if we carry on the way we're going and keep sort of, just growing and growing and growing without any consideration of the natural environment, we're going to wreck this planet. And of course, now we can
see the evidence.
We can see the evidence. If only people had started listening then instead of poo-pooing it.
Yeah.
So how does that link to trains and public transport generally? I mean, going back to my growing up days in Surrey, I was sent to sort of minor fee-paying day schools when I was a child. And I commuted by train to school from the age of 5 to 11.
Oh, right.
Indeed, from by bus after that to the grammar school. So in a sense, I've always loved trains. And so the combination of sort of loving trains, I love train journeys, particularly sort of, long distance ones, and you see things, and recognise...
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Personally, I love it too.
And recognising that, a train with 200-300 people on board, its impact on the environment is far, far, far less than everybody being in their private cars. And so, although I have a car and I use it because there's a lot of occasions when there's no option, I have got involved in my later years once I was winding down in career terms and started having some time, because I'm a bit of a workaholic. So started getting involved in campaigning for a better railway, because it's quite obvious that our roads are overcrowded, they're overpolluted. Even with electric cars, you still get congestion, you still get road casualties, you still get pollution from the tyres and brake dust. So electric cars environmentally are better than petrol cars or diesel cars, but they're not they're not wonderful. And there's an awful lot of carbon generated in terms of manufacturing them as well.
I believe so, yes.
So my belief is that we should be putting much more money into public transport so that it is there for people to use. If you live in Hebden Bridge, actually, we're very lucky. People may not think so when their train is late, but we do actually have very good train services compared to most places of a similar size. When you've got 4 trains an hour to Leeds during the day and 3 to Manchester, and you can get directly to York and Blackpool. I mean, that's pretty good. But try travelling on a Sunday morning, and you sort of got to wait till about 10 o'clock before you can get a train. Now, if you want to get a train, if you want to go to London or Newcastle or York or Hull or somewhere, by the time you've got to Leeds for a connection, you've lost half the day or more. So one area where we need better train services is that for Sundays, we need the same train service more or less as you have on a weekday. I mean, commuting patterns have changed, and not as many people commuting by train the same every more. But there are many more people using the train for leisure. The busiest days on the railway quite often now, particularly in our area, are actually at weekends, because people are getting out and about. But if you want to come back to a Sunday morning, you want to go anywhere on a Sunday morning, you probably get in the car because you want to get there before the first train starts. You drive along the A646 and it's congested. Now, buses are another form of public transport, and buses are good, but the inherent problem with buses, particularly if they're competing as an alternative to trains, is that unless they've got segregated busways, you've still got all the traffic problems. So bus services have become very unreliable because they keep getting stuck in traffic. And with the amount of roadworks, for example, on the A646, so people often get into their cars. If they're going to sit for a long time, they want to sit in their nice warm car in their comfortable seat and listen to their radio. And if we look at freight, I think anybody who drives gets sort of fed up with the amount of heavy lorries on the road. And basically, one freight train, a standard length modern freight train carries the same amount of goods as 76 lorries.
Yes.
And that is an enormous environmental impact.
Yeah.
And that train, okay, it has a very large engine, but that train is using 25%, is reproducing 25% of the carbon of the lorries that it's replacing, and that's enormous. So we need more freight on the railways. So why isn't there more freight on the railways? And one of the reasons for it is that our Victorian railway, a usual British problem, Industrial Revolution, we were the first. So we actually built to what
historically it feels as though that was great at the time, but everything's old now.
But now we have a railway system in which, although the tracks, what they call the gauge, is the same as in continental Europe, what they call the loading gauge is much smaller.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So most of our train lines, you cannot transport the largest containers, which are becoming the standard containers, because the tunnels and the bridges are too low. And it costs an awful lot of money to upgrade them, which is clearly what needs to happen.
Is that why in Europe we have those lovely double-decker trains?
Because they're not constricted, presumably. By
No, you couldn't have a double decker. But on a lot of railway lines in this country, you can't even have standard-sized containers. I mean, as you may know, the Transpennine, what they call the Transpennine line, the Transpennine route, which is basically Hull, York to Leeds, across to Huddersfield and Manchester, and across to Liverpool. Well, the section between York and Manchester is being upgraded. And that's taking about 10 years to do it. And they started 10 years after they should, the usual thing in Britain of everything starting too late. But they will be able to run new standard-sized container trains on that line. So that will make some relief from the M62, which we know is rather like a lorry park Monday to Friday.
Especially Friday.
Especially Friday.
It's a nightmare, isn't it?
And also, I mean, it's a land bridge between Ireland and the continent. So quite a lot of lorries are going across. I mean, less since Brexit. I mean, there's not much good that can be said about Brexit, but one thing Brexit has done is to create new shipping routes between the Republic of Ireland and mainland Europe, which has taken some lorries off the M62. But the M62 is still absolutely overcrowded. So when that is completed in the early 2030s, we will be able to get more freight on it, and there should be capacity for at least 2 more passenger trains each direction an hour, which will produce better services to the people who live in those intermediate stations on that line, who don't get a very good service at all, a greatly inferior service to we get on our line. So as I say, although we moan about our service, we're actually quite lucky. And we're lucky as well, aren't we, in Hebden Bridge, having such a lovely station and having a great ticket office.
You're involved in, is it the Friends of the Railway Station?
I was. I mean, when I say I was, I still am to a small extent. I was the founding chair of the Friends of the Hebden Bridge Station in 2007. A few of us who were involved, you remember the Upper Calder Valley Renaissance? A few of us involved in that decided we should have a group to look after the station. Because lovely as it was, at that time, it had one major problem, which was that it was inaccessible to people with disabilities. So it was quite clear that we needed to get a lift. And we were also concerned that we wanted to make sure that the fabric of the station continued to be preserved in its lovely state.
So was it you, and when I say, I mean, you collectively, not just you, Nina, who have got those lifts installed?
As much as you can, any one group can take credit. I mean, obviously the disabled people's groups were lobbying for it as well. And of course, we had at this time we had certainly 2 wheelchair users and one other person with disabilities as part of the Friends group. And their prime objective with the group was to get the lift. And we succeeded in doing that. And
it's brilliant, isn't it? And the waiting
rooms. That was a great achievement.
Yeah.
So we can for other things, like to get the car park extended, which we have done. And on busy days now, that car park, the bigger car park, is full. So COVID has during the week reduced the number of people using the car park compared to pre-COVID, but the numbers are getting back to what they were as more and more people are sort of going into the office at least part of the week.
And I love the waiting rooms, especially the one on the side going towards Leeds.
Yes.
And I've got a lovely picture of our grandson and his friend playing the piano in there, and it's just fantastic that such a thing exists, and newspapers, magazines, books that people have finished with. It just adds to the...
It is a community room. It's not just a waiting room.
I
think it's a good description. I mean, it is the Friends who look after that room.
Well
Can I pay tribute to David Taylor, who was one of our members who died just before Christmas? He had moved down to live near his daughter in Weymouth about 3 or 4 years ago. But David, who in his retirement, sort of basically became a very active railway historian, and he was responsible for all the getting the photographic display done in the station as part of the Friends. So
I've heard lots of people in those waiting rooms looking at the pictures, and it generated lots of discussions about the sort of the valley, the history, how marvellous the railways are generally.
And David has actually published a book for those that are interested, which is published by the Hebden Bridge Local History Society, and I think is still available, and you could order it through the bookcase in Hebden. But yes, so the Friends, yes, so there's a couple of bookcases. So as you say, we encourage people to leave books and magazines. The piano.
It's just lovely.
And as you may have noticed, well, you will have noticed, we actually have rather nice wooden benches in there, which is not normal. And that is something that the Friends campaign with Northern to get some seating in there, which was appropriate for the nature of the room. We also campaigned for better toilets. In fact, if you go back 10 years ago, you may remember that the toilets were pretty substandard. And so we campaigned for, for there to be an accessible toilet, as well as better toilet books. So the Friends have done a lot of things. As I say, I was the chair until 2014, which is when I took the chair of Rail Future over and decided not to do both. But I mean, I'm still involved with them to the extent, I sing in the carol service at Christmas. I also chair the Upper Calder Valley Sustainable Transport Group, which we're a bit low key because we're an unincorporated group, which means there's so much hassle these days to start having bank accounts and everything like that. So we just have an informal membership, no membership fee. But what we do, we've come out again of the Upper Calder Valley Renaissance, which had something called a Getting About group, and that sort of morphed into the Sustainable Transport Group. And what we do basically is keep an eye on things locally. We sort of lobby the council on things to do with road safety, to do with cycling, to do with walking. And in terms of trains and buses, when there's a consultation about something, we will respond to it. I mean, the last one, of course, was the ticket office. And we put in a very detailed response as to why the ticket office was really important and why it shouldn't close.
I was with you at that demonstration outside the ticket office
Yeah, I mean, we didn't organise that, as the Labour Party did, to give the Labour Party its credit. But
no, I went because somebody in my book group says people should go to this. Should start it.
Absolutely.
I think it's
absolutely. But I mean, we put in I think a 6-page response and sort of had a look at the figures, which Northern did provide. And whereas, they were saying, well, only 12% use the ticket office, but at Hebden Bridge, it's 18%. And when you translate 18% of a footfall of 750,000, you're talking, it's over 100,000 people a year, or over 100,000 a year. So, and people don't just use the ticket office to buy tickets. They go there to get information.
Yes.
They go there to try and get the best fares because the skilled staff in the ticket office will help you to get the best deal. And of course, as you notice, I mean, the ticket office staff will come out of the building if necessary to help people who have got a problem on the station, as a disabled person needs a bit of help. If a train is late or one's cancelled, then they will make announcements as proceeded to the station. For example, I was on the station the other day. The train to York was late, came in at the same time as the next Manchester one. Jason in the ticket office gets on the loudspeaker, says, this train coming in is the late running train to York. The 0950 to Leeds has been cancelled. If you have a ticket valid for the 0950 to Leeds, please get on the train that's just come in. Your ticket will be valid.
Yeah.
That's the sort of service you want, that you get when you've got people on the station, a community thing.
And there was one time I had to go to London, so I had to. It's not something I studiously avoid, but because I was on the Chase, the quiz show. And so I went to the ticket office and I said, they're paying for this. Here's the proof that they're paying. I don't know how to go about doing everything. So he came to the ticket, the automatic thing. He said, actually, that's your best thing to use, but I'll go through it with you, which he did. And I had to use my card. And I thanked him very much. Got home, and there's a message on Facebook saying someone has left their ticket, Visa card at the station in the machine. And I said, I think that's me. And so the ticket office, man in the ticket office, I think it was Jason, I phoned him. He came out, he said, yes, it's here. Somebody's handed it in, so we'll keep it safe for you. Couldn't have done all that without a ticket office. Somebody, whoever picked it up could well have taken it to the police or something.
But they may well have taken it to a police station in Leeds or Manchester because they got on the
it
train.
Would have been so much more of a faff. And I'd left my card and the return bit of my tickets. People like me need ticket offices.
That's actually something that we never considered. We think we had about 6 reasons why a ticket office shouldn't shut.
Yeah, well,
and that's the 7th one we shouldn't even think of. So, I mean, it just shows the benefit of service.
Yes,
But, I mean, our next campaign on ticketing, I mean, there's a proposal, which is a pilot coming in next week on LNER. And it only applies to services from London to Edinburgh, Newcastle and Berwick, but it's a pilot. And what they've done on those routes, they have scrapped the off-peak tickets, which is what most of us use if we want flexibility. And they're replacing it with something which basically has got the title's name 70 in it. And basically, it's booked for a train. But if you miss your train or you want to go early, you can catch a train 70 minutes either side of the window. But you have to have a reserved seat. So if you miss your train, you want to get the next one, but that train is full up, then you can't travel on it. So you'd then be forced to buy a full price open ticket to get back. So it's an absolute disaster. It's clearly come again from one of these so clever people in Department of Transport who are the ones who dreamed up the ticket office closures. So that's the next thing which we're going to have to get our teeth into fighting, so that the pilot becomes dead in its tracks. Because for those of us who want flexibility but haven't got, very, very deep pockets, we need cheap off-peak returns. We need safer type tickets. And if you're going to sort of make the railways traditionally, and it's one of the great things about the railway is it's turn up and go. Okay, there are advanced tickets, but you turn up and go. You come to a station, you can buy a ticket, you can get on the next train. And if it's off-peak, it's at a reasonable price. And you haven't got to book your seat. Okay, you take the risk, you might have to stand, but at least you can travel when you want. And that's a very precious thing. And that's the sort of thing which helps people, makes people choose the public transport option. If you know you're going to have to pay a fortune for your ticket, or you may not even be able to get on the train, you might choose to use your car if you've got that option, or you might choose not to make the journey at all. And that might mean you're not seeing your friends, or you're not going to a show, or whatever else you wanted to do. So this is the sort of thing which organisations like Rail Future, which we have to sort of be very vigilant about and campaign about and fight against.
Well done, you and everybody else involved in those organisations. It's one of the important things that, one of the reasons of doing this podcast is to remind people that there's always somebody working away in the background, for your benefit, and you're one of them, Nina. So thanks very much for that.
Yeah, thanks, Nina. It's been really interesting.
Thank you.